All right, guys. Well, welcome to our session. Thanks for attending. We'll go ahead and jump right on in. So this is part 2 of my favorite configuration manager features. Is there anybody in here that wasn't in part 1? A few of you guys, okay. Anybody that was in part 1 that's not here in part 2? Okay. There definitely is a few because there's a lot fewer seats, so I must have scared a bunch of people off. So since there are a couple of new people in here, I'll just hit a couple of things. The agenda's the same. We're just picking up where we left off. So I just want to walk through some of my favorite features. We're not going to rehash the stuff that we covered in part 1. We're going to jump right into where we left off in part 1 and finish that off. Do as much demo as possible. We should be able to get to some of those underutilized features that you guys might want to consider adding into your environments. And again, the goal is to incent you to utilize some of these features more effectively than you might now, or implement them completely if you're not utilizing them at all today. So this is the slide we left off on in part 1, which was the application model. It was like, I don't know, the 5th or 6th different feature we looked at in part 1. And we'd gotten through this second slide on the application model when we ran out of time. So this slide is just talking about some of the benefits of applications over packages and programs that you guys are primarily still utilizing right now. So they utilize requirement rules. So requirements rules state what has to be available on your client before this deployment type or application can run or install on your client computer. And common options are things that people are the memory, the disk space, the processor, primary device equals true, those type of things that we'll show you in the demos coming up. They also have detection methods. So to look and see if this application already is installed on your client, so preventing you from downloading from a distribution point and then trying to launch off the utility, whatever it is. So instead of having to have wrappers that you use today or your inventory rules that look at whether the software is not installed. Then they have dependencies. Dependencies are before this application can install or this deployment type for this application, you have to have this other application has to be installed as a dependency. So those are all some of the core features of a application. And again, the top bullet makes it easy for you guys to deploy. When you just say, take this app, assign it to this collection, make it available to this collection, and the client will figure out which of those deployment types in your application to go ahead and implement on that client. And I'll show you some examples here coming up. So a few other advantages of the application model. State-based. What that means is today in your packages and programs, let's say you take a program from a package, you advertise it or deploy it in 2012 to a target collection. And you make it mandatory or required. So the client's going to go ahead and install that piece of software. End user decides they don't want that software on their computer, so they go to add remove programs, they uninstall that software. In 2007, you're stuck. It's off. ConfigMan doesn't retry that automatically. Now you can put a recurring schedule on there, but then that would have everybody try and run that software again. Or you could create a brand new schedule, or there's ways to get around it, but it's not an automatic thing. With ConfigMan 2012, the application model, if you say this software, being this application, doesn't happen for packages and programs, is required on that computer, and it meets the requirements, it's not already installed, it has the appropriate dependencies installed, it's going to get reinstalled automatically. You have to do nothing. It just happens automatically. The last bullet, easy to deploy uninstall actions. So today in your packages and programs, you have to create a command line as a program to say uninstall or remove the software. In an application, when you build it, you specify the command line to install, the command line to uninstall. There's a built-in action to uninstall. So you just take the uninstall action and deploy it to your collection of clients that you want to remove it from. That's also state-based, which means if you say remove this software, for example, you had ABC software and your licenses are no longer valid, you're replacing it with XYZ software, you want to remove ABC. So you send out the uninstall action, removes it from all your computers. And then user says, I really liked ABC better than XYZ, they go and reinstall it. We're going to go ahead and uninstall it again automatically. So the admin intent is always going to win as a state-based application. You have alerts for compliance. So management wants to know, let me know if we're not, whatever our SLA is, 95% compliant after 7 days, whatever your appropriate values are. Alerting is built into the application model as it is in a lot of other things in ConfigMan 2012, but it's not for packages and programs. And with the R2 release, all alerts can generate email. So now if you're not 95% compliant after 7 days at your deadline, it'll go ahead and generate an alert in console as well as send you an email letting you know what the status is. Supersedence. Supersedence says, get rid of the old version of the software, replace it with the new version automatically. Assuming it can based on the fact that the old version is not a dependent app for some other app that's installed. But you're just saying, I have ABC app 1, I'm going to replace it with XYZ app 2. If there's an in-place upgrade, it can do that. If there's not, you tell us to uninstall, we'll uninstall ABC 1 and replace it with XYZ 2. So very cool. And then lastly, virtual applications. So virtual applications are app V, and it allows you to manage very effectively the ability of controlling who can install software on computers versus just use software. So the scenario is that I want to install through an MSI the application on my system. So I'll have an application with a deployment type that runs setup.msi. Then I know I have users that roam around, that they borrow other people's computers. I don't want them installing software on somebody else's computer. So I'll have a second deployment type, which is an app V application, or deployment type for that application. And I'll state in my MSI, my requirement rules are whatever my memory, disk space, operating system, blah, blah, blah. And one of them will be primary device equals true. Only allow this MSI to run if the logged on user is the owner of the computer. So I use Travis as my example in part 1. So Travis is on his computer. He gets this deployment. It runs through the requirement rules. He is the owner of that computer. Bingo, MSI installs, because we know Travis needs that software. Travis then leaves his software, comes over to my laptop, gets that same deployment, because it's targeted probably to him as a user, and runs through all the requirements, memory, disk space, processor, global groups, whatever it is, all pass, gets down to the last one, primary device equals true. Oops, nope, Travis is not the owner, primary user of my computer. So he can't install. So deployment type 1 fails. It falls down or back to deployment type 2, which is the app V version, passes whatever requirements there. Bingo, he's got the app V. So give him the software he needs to do his job in the proper type of software. Physically installed, so it's always there if necessary. Virtual on another computer is necessary. Maybe you got a mobile version of it, I'm on my mobile device, give me a mobile version of that application. So the software follows the user around just in the proper presentation format for that user. So those are a lot of the advantages of the application model. Now, not everybody's using it today. And why aren't you using it? The common reasons are you're just too familiar with packages and programs. You know how to make them work. As I said in the earlier presentation, you know the idiosyncrasies of it. So you don't want to take those precious brain cells that are at low commodity in some cases and utilize them for something new. You want to take those brain cells and use them for something else that you really have to do, because you know how to deploy software through packages and programs. So it makes sense. Maybe it's because you just have all those wrappers already created and you don't want to take the time to convert all that over to the app model because you already got the wrappers for all your different software. Maybe it's because you know that when you did your migration from 2007 to 2012, we migrated all your packages as packages. So if Microsoft does it, the product group does it, why don't I just stick with the old stuff? And that's just, we just brought them over that way for you for your convenience because you know how to use those. Well, for those last couple of scenarios, we actually have a utility, we being Microsoft, has a utility called the Package Conversion Manager. That's a utility you can use to hopefully automate the conversion of a package and program into an application with appropriate deployment types. So it does a real good job. It plugs into the admin console. So you go to your packages, you single select or multi-select, right click and do analyze. It'll tell you what the readiness is of each of those packages to be migrated or converted over to an application. If it's not an automatic scenario, in other words, it can't be done easily, it'll tell you what you need to do manually to get that into an automatic scenario or do it on your own. There's also some scripting on that through a blog where you can actually implement. So if I have a large number of those manual type packages, I can implement through a script scenario the automation process of that. So very, very cool and easy way to get from your packages and program scenario over to the application model. So let's look at a couple of things on that. Oops, I don't want to do this one yet. I want to do another one first. Go back to my local site. There we go. So here's where we left off. Let's go to the software library, go to my applications. And here you see I have an application, ConfigMan 2012 Toolkit R2. And you see that it states it has 2 deployment types. Again, deployment types mean programs for you guys in the old technology. So it has 2 different programs. If I click on the deployment types tab down at the bottom, it tells me that both the technologies or types of programs, they're both MSIs. So one you can see by the name is an attended install, and the second name is an unattended install. So it's MSI/I and then MSI/I/Q for unattended. So I have 2 different, they're the same technology, just like you can have with multiple programs of the same type. They could also be different technologies that I'll show you. So let me go to the attended installs properties. And here's my content. So here's where my source files are, very much like your package and program you have today. Here's my command to install the software. You see no /Q, so it's not unattended. Here's my command to uninstall the software. If you populate an uninstall command line when you build your deployment type, then you're allowed to initiate that uninstall action on an application. Here's my detection method. So here's how I determine whether or not this software is already there. So before I do anything else, when I download the policy, is the software already there? If so, I don't even bother with anything else. Because you just said, well, I'm looking for the software. If it's there, great. Now in Dallas last week at System Center Universe, somebody said, well, we have different builds of the same software. I want to know whether they have the current version, but the product GUID that you see here stays the same for all those different builds, which is fairly common. So all you would have to do is go to Add Clause and say from the file system, I want a file on, I'm just going to pick some random file on here. And I'll say it's program files x86. Here's the toolkit, I think. And I'm just going to look for policyspy.exe. And I'm going to say choose the bottom option. This file must be there, and it has to have a version of greater than or equal to something like that. So I'm saying from this path, this file must exist, and its version of the file has to be greater than or equal to this. So now I get the major versions that I'm interested in, and I don't care if it's necessarily the patch version. But you can put in the full octet, all of the version string if you want to, and make it require that if you really want to tell. So you can add this as another clause. So now it's going to check both for that GUID in the Windows Installer Database registry, as well as on the file system. And you can get as complex here as you want to. You could also, for those of you that are the scripters, create your own custom script to do this, whatever detection method you want. Okay, so now requirements. So here's the requirements for this application deployment type. A gig of memory, a gig of free disk space, and primary device equals true. Fairly common things. Nobody less than a gig can run it, nobody less than a gig free disk space, and you have to be on your computer to run the attended setup. And this has no dependencies for this example. So we're all good there. If we go to the unattended, I'll just show you real quickly. Things are going to look very, very similar. Content, it's the exact same path, because it's the same set of source files, just like your programs for a package. Programs, it's just a slightly different program. It's got the /Q command line on there. But in that, it's both MSI. It's the exact same uninstall string. Detection method, it's the exact same GUID I'm looking for in the database, as opposed to the file system or whatever, registry. And then for my requirements, 2 of the requirements are exactly the same, gig of memory, gig of disk space, but I'm saying primary device equals false. So I can't own the computer in order to run the unattended MSI. And that's not necessarily a great example, but just to show you that as an example. So, okay. So I've got that. Now there's one other real big advantage of the application model that you have, is that I'm going to go ahead and take this application, and I'm going to go up to the ribbon, and instead of saying deploy, I'm going to go ahead and do a simulation. You can't do this with packages and programs. So I'm going to simulate whether or not this might have a chance at installing. So I'm going to do simulate deployment. I'm going to go to my device collection. I'm going to take all desktop and server clients that has 5 members. And I get a warning message here if I hover over it. It says, sorry, you've already deployed to that collection. So you can't deploy the same software to the same collection more than once. So I'll go ahead and pick a different collection. And we'll go ahead and take all systems, which has those same 5 clients in it. You can also simulate an uninstall action. Would I be able to uninstall this software from computers? In other words, is there any place where it's required to be there because of a dependency for some other application? So I'm going to go ahead and simulate an install. Next, next, close. And I did just like you guys all do. I skipped the summary screen. Nobody reads it, even though we tell you some good stuff there, like how many computers in your target collection. So that's a policy gets created. It's being shipped out to my clients right now. We'll get results here in a couple of minutes. So we'll come back here in just a minute to look at these results. So while that's processing, we're going to go to my virtual environment that I have up on TechNet. This is the TechNet Virtual Lab. And the scenario here is I've got an application. There we go. I was going to say, I thought I loaded Zoom it. It's got 2 deployment types. If I click on the deployment types tab, you'll see the 2 different technologies. And here's a very classic example. One's an MSI, one's an AppV. So this is the scenario we went through before. Only install the MSI if I'm on my I'm logged onto my proper computer. Otherwise, do the AppV. So just to show you what those 2 requirements look like for those 2 different deployment types. And if you have multiple deployment types for an app, we always evaluate deployment type 1 as priority first, then we go to the second one, and then the third one, or however many you have. So for the first one, oh, this is running slow, requirements. I'm saying 500 megabytes of memory, 100 megabytes of free disk space on any drive, and primary device equals true. So you can only install if you have enough memory, enough disk space, and you're on a computer that you own. For the other one, the AppV version, go to its requirements. Oops, I need to, sorry about that. It's only got 1, and that's a specific operating system. So I'm just looking to see, do you have a specific operating system there? You don't have to say primary device equals false unless you only want it to run on those that are primary device equals false. So maybe I'm the primary owner, but I don't have enough memory disk space. So you can control that if you want to, but I just put the operating system 1 in here. And this one actually does have a dependency on it. So I click the dependencies tab. I'm saying before you can run the virtual version of the software, one of these 2 versions of Microsoft AppV has to be installed. The 64-bit or the 32-bit AppV 4.6 client agent has to be installed. So that's a dependency. So we check this before it tries to install, and you see that last column there says auto install yes, which means if I'm supposed to run the AppV software and AppV client's not install either the 64-bit or the 32-bit, whichever one's applicable, and I have requirement rules there looking for specific operating system versions, platforms, 64-bit versus 32-bit. Okay, so when this one got deployed, did it get deployed? Yeah, it's been deployed. So if I go to monitoring and go to deployments and my, what was it, rich copy. Rich copy. Oh, nobody's tried to install it. Okay, so nobody tried to install it. So, all right, we'll leave that. We'll go back over to our installed one on my local site. Let's go look at our status there. Monitoring, deployments. Here's my simulate at the top. I have no status for it. I click run summarization. Tells me it's going to go through the whole hierarchy, which is a single site for me. We count to 17. We hit refresh, and then we have our response. So it goes from 0%, and it should go up to 100% compliance. So we're 100% compliant in that software. If we look down at the chart down at the bottom, it says I got 1 success and 4 requirements not met. So let's go look at that status. Go click View Status. And my 1 success, already compliant, is primary 1, my site server. So what it's saying is, with this simulation, it's not going to install the software because it's already there. The toolkit's already installed, so it's not even to try and install it again. So that makes sense. That's what I want. Requirements not met. So requirements not met, it tells me what each requirement is. So primary device equals false. For the unattended install, it tried to do that. 4 assets failed with requirements not met. And if you look down at the bottom, it shows you the 4 assets, the 4 clients, and the requirement was primary device equals false. The actual value is true. On each of these computers, administrator was the primary owner of that computer. So that one failed. The other 2, physical memory, 1024 gig, and each one of them had less than that. I was darn close though. I was a megabyte off or 3 megabytes off. So what I would realistically do, I'd go back to my application deployment type, go to my requirement rules, I'd drop my memory down to maybe 1020 or even 1000. And then these would all pass. And then this software would come back with not blue requirements not met, but green being successful. It would be successful in the installation. It wouldn't say already compliant, it would just say success, which means it would be able to at least start whatever the install program is for one of those 2 deployment types. It does not try and run the MSI. So it's not simulating whether the MSI would be successful. It's just saying, do I pass the detection method? Is it already there? Like the first one said no. Do I pass any dependencies, if there are any? And do I meet all the requirements? So this is a great way to validate that stuff before you go live in your environment. I don't have to put any bits on the DP to do this. I just create the application and deploy it as a simulation. The other thing that's very cool with this, if I go back to the deployments node, is I go down to the deployment types tab at the bottom. I click that, and let me move this up a little bit for you. It shows me in its evaluation, here are all the statuses. So I had 1 computer that came back as already compliant for the attended install. I had 4 computers that came back as requirements not met for the attended install, and 4 that came back with the requirements not met for the unattended install. It tells you which of the deployment types, in this case, would have been tried, and if it was successfully installed. So if I have some software here that was successfully installed, here we go. This one, it shows you what type of software, attended versus unattended. It will show you what that software is. In this case, it's the same because it's a simulation in the real program. Software updates don't do that because they don't have deployment types on them. So, but it will go back and show you where that can be very beneficial for you is if I see that I have, in this case, let's think about the app V. Let's say the gold is the MSI and the purple is the app V deployment type. If I have that high of a purple bar, I'm going to think either a lot of people are cruising around using somebody else's computer in my environment, or I've screwed up my requirement rules on the MSI. Because I would expect I have a whole lot more MSI installs than app V uses. Now, maybe in your environment that would be totally opposite. But just in my scenario, that's what I would think. I'd have more people logged on to their own computer that should pass the requirements to install locally and not have to fall back to an app V version. But this will show you what those versions are that either got installed or run or would have been installed and run when you look at the simulation. So very, very cool. Something you definitely want to look at is the application model and start moving over there. You can use the package conversion manager to convert your packaging programs over if you want, or just start from scratch on new stuff. Not everything is a great candidate for the application model. The application model is fantastic for software you can identify is installed on a computer. A PowerShell script, you're not going to validate that that is installed on a computer. Yes, you can look to see is the PS1 there, but that doesn't do you a whole lot of good. So you can tell whether software is installed by registry or by file system or product Windows installer database and so on. But scripts, utility type stuff, yeah, the executable might be there, but that's not what you want. You want to know has it run. So those who are packaging programs are really good for those maintenance type things. But for actual software you're installing on clients, then your application model is actually a real good way, a better way of deploying your software. Oh, and one thing I forgot to show you was on that, let me go back to my virtual lab, was alerting. And I don't have an alert for my application model right now. I don't think so. Let me go back to software library and look to see, go to overview. That's software update group, but okay. If I had one for an application, it'd be sitting right here, and that's side loading keys. It'd be sitting right here, and it would say, hey, you told me to alert you if you weren't 95% compliant. You're only at 68% compliant. So it would tell me in the console, and can be via email, letting you know that you're non-compliant. So a great example was the one I was showing over here for compliance baseline, configuration baseline. It says your compliance for the baseline deployment, name of it, is 33% below the threshold of 90. So I set the 90, I set the time frame, and I'm only 1/3 of the way there. So it tells you that you're not where you expected to be, that you want to be notified. And you can do that for apps. You can't do that for packages and programs. Now you can create status filter rules and look for those specific status messages saying that you're installed or failed, which you can also do alerts on percentage of failures for those that try and install it. But it's something, again, you have to do on your own as opposed to just clicking checkbox saying alert me, percentage, time frame. Okay, automatic deployment rules for WSUS. These are very cool in that they can help you with the mundane job of deploying patches. So when Configuration Manager first started using WSUS as its patching technology back a number of years ago, the common complaint we got was, WSUS is a whole lot easier. I created an automatic approval rule in WSUS one time, and it does everything else. I never have to look at patching again, because it does what I tell it to do. In ConfigMan, every single patch Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever your date was, I had to pick my patches, launch the distribute software updates wizard, tell it which collection to deploy to, tell it whether to create a new software update group or join an update list that I already had. I had to go through there and tell it which package to go to, how I wanted to deploy these updates, available or required, what my time frame was, etc. I had to answer all these same questions. It was like 17 wizard pages in the old DSUW that I had to repeat every single month. Very, very repetitive. So it was a pain in the rear. So we added automatic deployment rules to basically equate to that WSUS automatic approval rule. Tell ConfigMan what you want it to do, then let ConfigMan do it on a automatic basis for you. So you don't have to do the job. So as of ConfigMan 2012 R2, we added a couple of features there to enhance it. One was the ability of changing your deployment package. Prior to R2, when you created a deployment package in your ADR, you would state use an existing package or create a new one. That every time that ADR would run, it would put the new updates in that whatever package you designated. And that's okay. There's no limit on how big your package can be. The problem, however, is as your package gets larger and larger and larger, ConfigMan can handle it, but it might be harder to get it across your links out to your remote DPs. So sometimes you wanted to make smaller packages after a period of time. You couldn't do that in your old ADR. You couldn't go back and say, oh yeah, don't use that package anymore, use this one. So you had to delete the ADR, create a brand new one with a new package ID or package name on it and source and go from there. Now you can just go in there on the fly and say, hey, don't use package 1 anymore, use package 2. But the cooler thing is the ability of validating what your content is going to look like. You have the ability of putting in your criteria. These are the patches I want to deploy. So deploy these patches to this set of clients using these DPs with this type of criteria on it. You put that criteria on there as far as which patches you want to deploy. In the old days, it was kind of a guessing game. I put in my date released or revised, my product, my classification, my title type stuff, and I would hope that things worked right. Now you don't have to hope. You click the preview button and it will show you which patches, which metadata meet your criteria. And I'll show you that in the demo in a second. So why are people not using ADRs? The common reasons I get are patching is really important. If patching gets screwed up, I have to update my resume. And I don't want to update my resume. So I'm going to take total control over patches. I'm going to do everything manually, just for job security. With that preview button, you should be okay now. If you're still leery, I'll show you what you could do. You have the AER do all the work except for enabling the deployment. Have it create the software update group, have it download the patches, have them put them in your package, have it deploy those patches to your clients, have it distribute to your DPs, set the timing on everything. Just don't make the deployment active. So it's not pushing anything out to your clients aren't installing anything from it, everything else is done. Then you go validate what got created. Once you validated things, then you just right-click your deployment, say enable, and bingo, then it becomes live. So that's your fail-safe. Another common answer is that it's a complex process. I do my test lab first, then I have a pilot in production, then I do my dev environment, then I do my workstations, then I have 3 different phases that I roll out to my servers. You can't do all that in one ADR. Okay, you create multiple ADRs. Just have different collections you're targeting, maybe a different set of software patches you're deploying, with different criteria on when they get deployed, when it's required, when they're available, and so on. So let's go take a look at that. Go back here. Go to the software library. Oops, I was in the monitoring, yeah. Software library, let's go to software updates. I got a whole bunch of updates in my environment. More than 1,000, obviously, with the bar here. I've got a few software update groups. I've got 1 deployment package, I think, yeah. And then got no ADRs. So let's go create one quick. NIC patches. I'm going to use a template. What all the template does is it fills in a lot of the answers in the wizard for you. So I'm going to take the Patch Tuesday template. There's a template for Patch Tuesday. There's also a template for definition updates, endpoint protection. There's different settings on it. So we'll take the Patch Tuesday template. Here's the collection of clients I want to deploy my updates to. I'll say my workstations. And if you're one of those guys, before I get there, then you say, when I run this wizard, when this ADR runs, I want to create a brand new software update group every time, which makes sense. Every month, I'm going to get a brand new set of patches from Microsoft I want to deploy, put them in their own group, software update group, that I can report compliance on. I want to report compliance on January's updates, separately from February's updates, separately from March's updates. Otherwise, for something like the endpoint protection scenario, I don't want to create a brand new ADR or brand new software update group every single time I download a definition. Microsoft releases 3 a day, every 8 hours. After a week's time period, that's like 20-some different software update groups. So there you would say add to an existing one, and it would just keep appending definitions in there. But for monthly patches, you may very well want to go there. So the bottom option is the one that you might want to utilize if you're still concerned about your job. And that is, just clear this checkbox. Let the ADR do all of its work. Just don't let it enable the deployment. That means no clients are getting patched. But everything else is staged for you. You then go verify what got created. Then once it's been verified, then you just right-click and say enable. And bingo, you're off and running. Okay. We'll take the defaults there. I'm going to go ahead and change my release to revised. Here's my preview button. If I click preview, I shouldn't have anything here. Yeah, I haven't synced anything in the last day. So I'm going to say I last synced, I think it's 3 months in this image was the last time I have any. I guess we can try 2 months to see if I have anything in there for security updates in the last 2 months. Yeah, 149 security updates in the last 2 months been released. Okay, that's way more than I want to work with right now, so let's go ahead and put in a product. I only want Windows 8.1 image updates. So scroll down to products, take Windows 8.1. And now let's go ahead and click preview. 40. Got 40 updates there. That's okay. A lot of these say, let's see if there's any x86 in here. There could be some x86 in here, so there's 40 of them. I only want to see x64. It's all I care about. So I'm going to go down and add title. And I'm going to say title includes x64. I'll add that. Click OK, and now I'll click preview. Dropped it down to 20. Now, that's something you guys might do. Another very, very common title thing you do is you go in there and do a --itanium, because you don't want to deploy itanium updates, which I misspelled. I think that's spelled correctly now. So I don't want to have any itanium updates I probably don't have any here. Yeah, I don't have any for for Windows 8.1. So there I got 20 updates in my environment. So that allows you to filter that and see what your updates are. Now, absolutely understand, I create this ADR today, it might not run for 3 weeks until the next Patch Tuesday cycle. Depends on what my next wizard page does. So when this guy actually runs, you certainly may get a different set of updates than these here. Because my criteria may not be last 2 months anymore. So some of these will filter out, new ones will come in. But at least I'm validating I'm getting the correct type of updates in my wizard right now. So now I feel a whole lot better that I supply the correct criteria to Configuration Manager. This is the way I want it. This is going to do what I want it to do. And normally it's going to be in the last day or 2 days or whatever it is. I just happen to have a stale environment here. Okay, then I would go here to my next page, and this is when I want to run the ADR. You're going to run it on a schedule, and this is every 30 days. That's fine. Some people will run it after a software update point synchronization event. So after I sync with Moo, go ahead and run this automatically, see if anything's changed. So you can do that. You can force it to run whenever you want to. I'm going to deploy my updates in this Patch Tuesday scenario. I'm going to not make them available for 4 hours. That gives the site server time to download all these updates from Moo and then get them distributed out to your distribution points, get them staged. And then after that, they're required on your clients after 7 days. So in 7 days and 4 hours, these updates are required on all your clients. So you're giving them a week to manually install them if they want through Software Center. Otherwise, they're going to go ahead and get forced on them after a week and 7 days, or a week and 4 hours. And of course, you can change these values because this is just what the template put in there. You're going to display in Software Center, which makes sense because you're giving them a week time frame. If you wanted this to be totally unattended, you say hide, so they wouldn't see anything. You say, yeah, I want to ignore maintenance windows for installing software updates, but I don't want to ignore maintenance windows for rebooting. So you get to control that however you want to. And here's your alerting that you can do on applications. If I'm not 90% compliant after 7 days after the deadline, generate an alert for me. I can set these values any way I want to. That's just what the default is. And we're going to allow the normal stuff, fall back to an older my non-preferred DP, get patches on a slow network if I want to, and fall back to Moo if I really need to get the patches. And lastly, I would say, it doesn't make sense to put my Windows 8.1 updates in my Windows 7 package, so I would create a new deployment package, Windows 8.1, and give it my source. Oop, not primary one, it's primary. $, and updates, Win 8.1. And here's the, wow, thank you. They apparently like the path of Win 8.1. Here's the distribution points I want these patches to be staged on when they get synchronized. And then I want to download from the internet. And then I only want to use English language. Sorry, not using Norwegian. And bingo, I got my ADR. Then I would just go ahead and hit right click and run now, or just wait till the schedule time. I'll go ahead and click run now. So it says it's going to go ahead and kick off and launch. And obviously I misspelled NIC too. I don't type very well when I'm under pressure. You guys put me under a lot of pressure. So NIV patches. So the NIV patches is going to create a brand new deployment package. There it is, Windows 8.1. It's going to go ahead and create a brand new software update group. It's going to say Patch Tuesday. No, it's going to say NIV update or whatever I called it, dash, and then today's date and time. And that's after it's done doing its download of updates. So right now it's working the process of downloading updates to put into this package. And remember, it had 20 updates to download. It's downloaded one of them so far. So it's going to go ahead and create everything. So while it's doing that, I can take you back over to that virtual hands-on lab and just show you the last thing it would create here is the software update group. And here you see it's created a couple different ones. And here's the one that it created today, February 2nd, or February 12th. So it created this one today when it ran. It's got a deployment created for it automatically, and this deployment is enabled. If you had cleared that checkbox on that first wizard page that said enable deployment, this would say enabled no. Once I validated everything, I would right click and say enable, and bingo, it's active patch deployment then. So that helps give you that sense of security that we did things correctly, we being configuration manager, and the things are going to happen the way you want them to happen in your environment. So that's why AERs are really cool, because they help alleviate some of that mundane, repetitive actions related to your Patch Tuesday scenarios. You very likely still have to run the DSUW for those out-of-band scenarios, but for your Patch Tuesday stuff, they can help alleviate a lot of that repetitiveness. Okay, software update maintenance windows. This is new as of ConfigMan 2012 R2. What these allow you to do is to really be guaranteed when your patches are going to be deployed. This is a server-based scenario primarily. It certainly works for workstations as well, but it's really designed around the server scenario. Prior to R2, let's say I do the software updates on my servers, and Travis does application deployment. You remember the role-based administration? I let Travis do software distribution to my servers. He puts a maintenance window on there for one day. I put a maintenance window on there for when I want patches deployed. Well, the client takes the next available maintenance window. So my patches would deploy during his maintenance window, which was for his software distribution. So let's go back to my environment. Let's go show you that. Let's go back to our device collections. And we're talking about servers here, so let's take all servers. Let's go to properties. And we go to maintenance windows. I'm going to add a maintenance window. Here's my Travis window, so software distribution. And Travis wants to deploy software on Saturdays from 1 a.m. to midnight. He looks down here at type of window, and there's nothing there. It says software distribution, so he takes all deployments, which makes sense. Creates a window. I want to deploy patches to the same collection of clients, so I come in here, I create my own window. I say Wally patches, and I want 1 a.m. to 4 a.m., but I want my patches on Sunday. I know this is R2. I know there's a patch window, so I drop down and say software updates. And I click OK. Now we have 2 patch windows. So let me go ahead and run a report for you real quick. Go to reporting, reports. I want to run maintenance windows available to a specified client. Run that report. SRS, oh, it's, wow, there already. I want to look at my domain controller. When can patches be deployed to my domain controller? A pretty important server for me. So I'll say view report. And it says I have 2 maintenance windows available. I have the Travis software distribution window, which is Saturdays at 1 a.m. for 3 hours. And I have the Wally maintenance window, which is on Sundays. I don't know what happens in Norway, but in the US, Saturday comes before Sunday. So my patches would deploy in the next available window, which would be Saturday's window. So my patches are being deployed during Travis's window, outside of R2. Now with R2, because I went ahead and designated this guy right here as a software update maintenance window, because of that designation, patches will only ever deploy during this window. They'll never deploy during Travis's software distribution window. Now, if Travis accidentally set his window type to software updates, then if I have multiple software update windows, maintenance windows, it'll deploy during the next available one that the patches meet the criteria of and so on. But if Travis only does his all deployments and I do my software updates, anytime you have a maintenance window for a client that has software updates on it, that's the only type of window software updates will ever deploy in. So now you're much more guaranteed on when those patches will be deployed. Now, what the product group needs to do is add the maintenance window type here to this report, so you can tell by looking at it, because it doesn't tell you that it's a software update specific one. It just has a column for, is it operating system deployment specific? So it has that column, but not one for patching. Also, a failure is that on the patch window, or on the windows themselves, that was all servers. If you just look here, you can't tell what type of window it is. So what they really need to do is add a, right here, like type and say, oops, why is it not typing for me? I lost my mouse. Anyway, right in here, there it is. Right here they should say type. So patch, OSD or task sequence, everything. And just let you know by looking at it. So that feedback's been supplied to the team, and hopefully they'll get around to implementing that sometime. Okay, so we got, those are my favorite features. We got 15 minutes left to talk about some of the underutilized features. So here's things that I don't see enough people utilizing that they probably should use. And if you were to implement some of these things, it could very well help you out in your environments with managing Config Manager. So remember, there were a few of the different features in there. RBA, application model, AERs, where I had that slide, why don't people use them? So when I've done this as a separate presentation just on underutilized features, those were in there. Because even though everybody has to use RBA, they don't use it always correctly. And same thing with app model and AERs. So they're favorite features, but they're also underutilized. So asset intelligence. Asset intelligence is a way to help get inventory of your applications from your clients. Today, what a lot of people utilize is software inventory. And let me tell you, that's a really, really, really bad idea. It's very expensive on your clients. It's very expensive in your environment to do software inventory. So realistically, you only want to do true software inventory if you need to find files by specific file attributes, a specific file size, specific date and time. I want to know is iExplore.exe, is it version 11.3.17.4, whatever it is, or some date and time stamp. If I want to know whether Internet Explorer is installed, I don't use software inventory. So that's why you'll see when I do my demo here, if I remember to do this, you won't see any inventory rules created for software inventory in Config Man 2012. It's enabled, but there's no rules for it, so it doesn't really do anything. We don't really want you using software inventory anymore. Use hardware inventory instead. Hardware inventory, way back long ago, we started doing add remove programs inventory of applications in hardware inventory. And then in, SMS 2003, Service Pack 3, I think it was, we got the Asset Metrics product, which is now Asset Intelligence. So it's a database of application signatures that we inventory through hardware inventory to identify whether the app's there or not. So much, much better way of finding your software on your computer than is the software inventory feature itself. So you can import license information. So you can import a CSV file or a Microsoft volume license statement. And then what you can do when you import either one of those two or both of them, you can then run reports to say, here's what inventory says I have installed for this application. Here's what my licensing says I have licensed. And you can see whether you're over or under. So the next time you renew your licenses, do you need to buy more licenses or do you need to not buy as many licenses? That's very cool. You can add custom categories, families, and labels to help control your software a little bit better. I see people using labels like for PO numbers, maybe warranty information, a lot of that type of stuff if you get bulk software. And you can request updates to the catalog. Every week you can say, Microsoft, download any new updated applications for me. Not actually the physical binaries, but the definitions for my catalog, as well as here's software I found that you don't know about Microsoft, go and categorize it for me. So why do people don't use it? The common answers I get are, I don't know what it does. It wasn't in SMS 2003 initially, which is where I started doing software inventory, so I've just kept doing software inventory. And I don't know what this asset thingy does, so they don't know what it does, so if you don't know, you don't implement something, because you don't never can tell what's going to happen in an environment when you implement something, especially when something config man that touches everybody. So you don't know it, so you leave it alone. You discovered that it's there, it can do some stuff, but it doesn't do everything you want. It doesn't give me all the customizations I need. I need to be able to do normalization of my software. When you run this, it might show you 17 different versions of Microsoft Office Professional Plus in there. Different versions, and it'll say Word and Excel and PowerPoint and so on. You want to normalize that all down into Microsoft Office Professional 2010 or whatever it is. Asset Intelligence doesn't do a great job of that normalization. You need third-party applications or third-party software to really do that really, really effectively. But if you just want to know, hey, who has Visio installed, you can very easily find that through the Asset Intelligence. It's when you need more detailed compliancy, as well as maybe monitoring warranty information, maybe tracking your purchase orders, maybe doing depreciation of your assets, maybe associating cost centers. Yeah, you can do some of that with your custom labels, but If you don't want to do that manual process of doing that, a third-party scenario like Cyrusen has asset management technology. That'll grab stuff from ConfigMan and suck it over to Service Manager, and then lets you look at it through the Cyrusen portal or through Service Manager directly. And you can do a lot of customizations there that Asset Intelligence doesn't necessarily let you use or do. So let's take a quick look at that. The first thing you have to look at is Asset Intelligence by default is not fully enabled. So all Asset Intelligence does for you by default is tells you who's the logged on user, and that's enabled by default, but it doesn't tell you any software that's installed. So if you don't enable this, all you're getting is software that's registered in add remove programs by default. So I went in here and enabled this. One thing to watch for is when you enable these classes, you probably don't want to enable these two classes. The reason being is twofold. One is if you hover over a class, it tells you all of the reports that are built into the product that use that class of data. So this one has 4 different reports that uses Win32 USB device. If you hover over these two, it tells you that class is not currently supporting any Asset Intelligence reports. There's no built-in reports that use this data. So unless you want to build your own reports, no sense enabling the class because it just creates data. And the second reason is, you remember that customer I told you about in part 1 where their inventory files were greater than 50 megabytes on their terminal servers? It was because of this. They enabled these two classes, which gives you all your installed software, all the executables, and that just, on a terminal server, just got those inventory files larger than ConfigMan could process. So it generates way bigger files and is not used for anything unless you want to use it on your own. Okay, so I've done that, and now it tells me how much software I have that's inventoried by Microsoft and how much is not inventoried by known by Microsoft. So I got 23 apps that are identified by Microsoft. I got 34 in my environment that aren't identified by Microsoft. So what that means, if I go here and click on that, it shows me any of these guys here that say unidentified. That's one of those 34. Microsoft doesn't know how to classify this software, where the other ones, system and network or infrastructure as a category and family respectively, those are things that Microsoft knows. So if I take one of these that are unidentified, I can go ahead and manually categorize them. I can say this is, yeah, that's this one and that's this family, whatever it is. I can do that. I can go ahead and create my own custom categories and families, which I have in here because I went ahead and did migration. And now if I go back up to the top, there you see I imported a custom category and a custom family that came from that migration stuff I did earlier. So I can do that in categories on my own. You can even take some of the stuff Microsoft has categorized and recategorize it the way you want it. But then you can also take your software that's not known. You can go ahead and right click, and if you have the appropriate service enabled called the Asset Intelligence Sync Point, you can go right here and say request catalog update. That sends this definition of the application up to Microsoft, has their research people do the analysis, and then we'll do a catalog update that lets you know what categorization they think it should fall under. So you do that. Once you've done that, then you go to monitoring, you go to reports, and if you go down to the Asset Intelligence category, you'll see that you have 62 reports built in for Asset Intelligence. A whole bunch of them in the hardware category. So there's hardware reports, there's license reports, there's software reports. So then you can go run reports to see how many installations do I have? What's my licensing say? How many computers have this piece of software installed? Show me all the software that's installed all over the place. Let me see software that's not being utilized. So when was the last time a piece of software was used? So maybe I can not renew it next time I get my licensing. So it can give you some great information out there. You just may need to enhance it with some third-party product if you need more than what this base product gets you. Okay, Microsoft Intune integration, and I've only got 5 minutes left, so we'll have to cruise. Microsoft Intune integration, formerly called Windows Intune. This is Microsoft's solution to managing mobile devices. So my Windows Phone over there, or your iOS devices, your Androids, your Windows RT, and so on. This was Microsoft's solution to do that. Some of you might already have like AirWatch or Mobile Iron or Good or Zen or whatever it is, some third-party product, that's fine. It's just a way of letting you get these guys in your database. They're managed just like you'd manage a Windows 7 laptop or Windows Server 2012 R2 server computer. So it allows you to go ahead and manage those all together, as well as your Macs and your Linux, Unix devices. So all on a single console. It lets you get to control who enrolls their devices into your environment. Once they enroll, you get hardware inventory, applications installed on them. You get the ability of deploying applications to them, setting some settings on them, sending some profiles out to them. So doing some controlling of what those devices can do in your infrastructure. So why do people tell me they don't use it? Microsoft came to the game too late. So by the time Microsoft got a solution out there, we'd already picked something else because we had to start doing this. Absolutely a valid point. However, I will tell you that Microsoft was actually the first to the game. We actually had this back in SMS 2003, which shows you how long ago it was. But we removed it after SMS 2003 because nobody used it. The market wasn't ready for it. So we were there ahead of everybody else. So we took it away because nobody used it. And then people started using it. We didn't have the feature there anymore. And then when they added the feature back in to the on-premise solution, it was only for managing Windows Mobile 6.0 type devices, which we know how popular those were. So valid point. It doesn't have all the features that the competitors have. So even if you don't have a solution today, you try and do some analysis comparing Intune versus AirWatch versus Mobile Iron, and yes, they have some features that Microsoft doesn't have in their solution. Microsoft's working on that. They've made a lot of strides over the years. In fact, they've done a ton of things since I left the product group. Hopefully that's not because of me. But they've done a ton of things to get more competitive in that marketplace. They have stated publicly they are going to surpass the competition in terms of feature set. So their goal is that never again will somebody not choose Intune because of feature set that somebody else can have. The other one I hear a lot is subscription price. Microsoft charges you on a monthly basis per user. A lot of bean counters don't like that. They say, charge me the exact same amount on a yearly contract. Bingo, I can do that. I just can't justify paying X amount on a per month basis, even if the end result's the same as a yearly contract. So, okay, since I don't have time, I'm going to skip Intune. You guys will have actually a lot of sessions here this week on Intune. So if you want to see it, I'll have my images. You can come look at them later on. Two more things real quick. Endpoint protection. So antivirus, anti-malware. You got to have it, obviously. You can't live without it. This is Microsoft's solution. It's built into Configuration Manager. You just have to turn it on. Very, very simple, easy thing to do. Then Configuration Manager can manage it. One of the nice things is it has great dashboards that will let you see the status of all your clients, whether their definitions are up to date, whether they have the agent installed, whether they're inactive. Lets you know if there's been any malware breakouts in your environment, who's had them, what they are. Lets you control some of that stuff. You can have different policies or settings for different sets of clients, kind of like those custom client settings I showed you before. Have them also for endpoint protection. There's also Macintosh and Linux versions of endpoint protection. They don't integrate into the admin console, and they're not manageable by Config Manager like the Windows stuff is, but there are solutions for them. So why do I hear people don't use it? You already have licenses for Shavlik or McAfee or Symantec or whoever it is. You paid a lot of money for these things, and so even though the next solution's free, you're not just going to drop what you have. Now, a lot of people tell me when their licenses are coming up for renewal on their third party, then they go ahead and look at endpoint protection to see if it can give them the features they want. So sometimes you'll see reviews state that the endpoint protection product doesn't give you the same features of the competitors. So oftentimes those are reviews that are sponsored by somebody else, so they don't always paint Microsoft in the best scenario. I would just tell you, go to your test lab, enable it, try it out, compare it with your solution to see if it does give you the features that you need, and see if it's something that you might want to go to, because you can save tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year by getting a free solution as opposed to one that you're paying for licenses on. And again, don't have time to demo that, but if you want, you can come find me and I can show you a couple things on it. And lastly, compliance settings. And if you were in here in Kent's session, right between my two, he was in the same room. He did a great talk on compliance settings with a bunch of demos. But this is a great utility to find configuration drift. You all have corporate things you need to do in your environments that you stamp your computer with, whether it's registry settings, whether it's WMI, whether it's specific printers, whether it's shortcuts on your desktop, whether it is applications you have to have, or OS settings. You have all those configured. This tool will let you find out if any of your computers are drifting away from your corporate baselines and your standards. So it's a great way for that. You can look at OS stuff, you can look at application stuff. If you integrate with Macintoshes, there's specific settings for Macs. If you integrate with Windows Intune or Microsoft Intune, it has settings for Microsoft Intune mobile clients as well, that you can control cameras and browser access and store access and so on. Whole ton of things that you can do there for that. You can easily create collections of non-compliant systems. So one of the cool things, this product will do remediation. If you find that a device is not compliant with your standards, you can have it put it back into compliance by remediation. Now, not everything can be remediated. For example, if you're looking to see if a specific piece of software is there, you can't have compliant settings, remediate, and put that software on there. But you can create a collection of those computers without that software, non-compliant, and just target software distribution to that collection of computers. So why don't people use it? You don't understand what it does. I will be honest with you, the UI to create standard configuration items, and well, baselines are really simple, but standard configuration items is not the easiest to understand. The product group honestly did a really lousy job of that UI. If you look at some of the new stuff in R2, some of those profiles as part of compliance settings like VPN, Wi-Fi, email settings, and so on, much easier UI to work with. So the product group knows they have to clean up that UI to make it easier to utilize. You tried in ConfigMan 2007, you found out that it was only monitoring and not management. So it didn't remediate, so you gave up on it. It would only tell you who was out of compliance, and you had to do your own stuff to make it go back into compliance. Well, now it remediates registry, WMI, and custom scripts. So it's very, very easy to get things back into compliance. Don't want to create your own configuration items and baselines. There's numerous different sources available to you to download these. Microsoft has a site called Pinpoint, and on Pinpoint there's dozens of different configuration packs that you can download, some free, some you have to purchase, license, that will go ahead and give you configuration items and baselines that you can go ahead and tweak as necessary for your own environments and then deploy locally. And then lastly, too hard to create buckets of systems that are non-compliant. It's actually really, really simple. Go to your deployment, right-click and say, give me a collection of all non-compliant systems. And walk through the wizard, like 3 different necks, and click close, and bingo, you got a collection of all your non-compliant systems. And then you target your software to those to make them compliant again. So it's actually very, very easy now with 2012 and R2. So again, I'm out of time on that, so I will stop. I'm 2 minutes over, which I apologize for. So there you had it. If you're here for part 1, you saw all my favorite features. Well, if you're here for part 1 and part 2, you saw all my favorite features, and then those that I think that are underutilized in the product. A few of them are favorites, others were the last few that we talked about here in this presentation. So hopefully it helped you. You learned something on those features. You saw something maybe you weren't utilizing correctly on one of those, or maybe you weren't utilizing it all. Maybe you said, hey, I did everything correctly. I'm one of Wally's favorite children because I did everything right. So that may be the case. So hopefully, if nothing else, it gave you some satisfaction that you are brilliant and you're doing things great. Otherwise, you might have seen something that might help you out in your environment. So there's a ton of resources out there, whether it's product group, TechNet docs, whether the hands-on labs like that one ad loaded, whether it's the community with the TechNet forums, lots of MVPs, consultants out there that know ConfigMan really well to help you learn stuff. So a ton of goodness out there. Go explore it, utilize it, and make your environments all better. So thanks for hanging around and listening for a couple hours, guys. Appreciate it. Have a great rest of your conference, guys.